Hi there, and welcome to Hearthside. My name is Michelle. I am the author on this blog. I'm just trying to catch up on some of my accessible video copies for blog entries. We'll see how far I get. As you can see, I have my Pride attire on today because there is an area south of where I live that we affectionately or not so affectionately refer to as the Bible Belt of Canada. They've put a call out to local communities. If anyone's able to attend their Pride, they're actually afraid to put it on this year. So, yeah, represent. I will be heading out shortly, so not sure how far I'm going to get here today. But it fits right in a way with this particular blog post because I want to talk about Canadian holidays and looking at them through Heathen lens. Now, I got this idea because I'm involved in a bunch of different online groups, discussion groups and such, with people in Canada, people in the United States, a few people from other places as well, in Europe or Australia, etc. And recently, in one of these groups, we were talking about how in the United States they were trying to find the meaning in American holidays from a heathen perspective, just to make those days more meaningful and to see them in a less problematic light in some cases. They wanted to be mindful of the colonial history of America and working to move past that. And that made me think about Canada because we have the same sort of things going on here with a lot of our holidays. So holidays are about belonging to a nation or group of people. But how do we feel that sense of belonging when we ourselves are outside of the overculture, as I call it, which is the prominent cultural group in your nation? So heathens, of course, are in the minority, but there's a lot of other groups that we ally with who are also in the minority, and how does that affect all of us trying to reconcile our shared history, in this case, shared colonial history, that, and what does that mean for modern inclusive heathens? I'm going to focus on in Canada, but you can extrapolate to wherever you're living. And I think this will be most interesting to people who lived someplace that was colonized. So Australia, United States, South Africa, etc., etc., etc. There was a great reach of the British Empire in particular, but other groups as well. So how do we reconcile this colonialism and also like the overarching religion if it's not the same as our own? So if you're not familiar with Canadian holidays, there are very few overall in the course of a year, and even less are actually days that are off of work for people. Some of the days are provincially recognized only, or have different names for the same day off in different provinces, even if they fall that same day or that same weekend. And the majority of the holidays are either Christian or colonial in origin. So what does that mean for us? And let's take a look. So I started after winter nights. Basically, I reckon winter nights is usually in October. So the first holiday that would come after that would be November 11th, which is Remembrance Day. In the States, I believe you call it Veterans Day. So this is a day to honor those who died in war, honor veterans. And what some people may not know is in Canada there's actually Remembrance Week, which includes a day to honor Indigenous veterans on November 9th. But November 11th is the day off each year. And that has to do with the 11th hour, 11th minute thing. And that, I believe, is globally recognized as an important thing to recognize, but I'm not 100% sure. I know it's the same in the United States anyways. So this one, I feel like there's not really much stretching that needs to be done to make this observation heathen, because it's ancestor veneration, which is a huge part of our religion. So there's not really too much to unpack in that particular one. But moving on, the next day that is a holiday in Canada is Christmas Day. So December 25th. And of course, this is a very Christian holiday celebrating Christ's birthday. Interestingly, it wasn't Christ's actual birthday. The day was moved to this day historically to be close to the winter solstice, and traditions of various pagan groups. So, for heathens, Yule occurs on different days depending on tradition, so it could be anywhere from December 20th into the end of January, beginning of February, depending on the year. But most heathens seem to recognize a season of Yule or Yuletide, in addition to the day or days of observance for them. Also, many heathens have Christian family members and may observe Christmas in some sense with their families because family is so important to heathenry. And the celebration of Yule includes gift giving and feasting similar to Christmas. So, while we might not be celebrating Christmas, there is that family aspect to consider. A lot of us have Christian family still. And getting together and that sort of tradition over the winter makes sense with the Yuletide season. There's another day that is in Canada called Boxing Day, which is December 26th. So Boxing Day is a holiday that has roots in feudal England. I actually had to look this up. Like, I knew it was from England, but I had no idea that this was basically the day that the lords would give their servants a box of goods to thank them for their service over the past year. So basically, after they had created the perfect Christmas for the lords or whatever, the next day then they would get some sort of present as a thank you. So in modern times in Canada, it's acts mostly as a recovery day after Christmas for people who have had big family gatherings. And also Boxing Day or Boxing Week has sales similar to Black Friday, but a bit smaller scale. The other things that people usually do on these days are go outside, watch a hockey game, winter types of sporting or outdoors activities. So how do we make this heathen? It's a strange one. Like, I had no idea, like, that was exactly what it was about until just now, and I don't think most Canadians do. So, it isn't too difficult to make this day heathen, because as heathens, we're recognizing during the dark time of the year, it's about slowing down the pace. It's about spending time at home or with family, or just, like, not working. So an extra day off to not work this time of year, it just sort of fits with your natural cycle. And I feel as a heathen, I'm more aware of what my body is telling me in the winter, and it's telling me I shouldn't be working so much. I should be resting, I should be eating good food, I should be sleeping more, and in the short day period, I should be spending as much time outside while there's light out. So yeah, it seems like in that sense, it's already a heathen holiday. But in the historical sense, which nobody seems to be aware of, yeah, that's a bit sus. So as you can see, there's already like our holidays that are nationally recognized are pretty problematic. Moving on to New Year, January 1st. The celebration of the New Year in the Gregorian calendar, with most of the celebrations actually taking place December 31st and January 1st just being the day for recovery from the festivities. So, not all heathens use a Gregorian calendar in their practice, but it's still necessary for business. I really haven't met any heathens so far who are opposed to the celebration of this holiday. So, yeah, it's fairly unproblematic, even though it doesn't maybe fit with everybody's ritual calendar. Most people recognize the calendar year as something that's used by the broader overculture to recognize time. So, yeah, most people celebrate that, as far as I can tell. And then we move on to the third Monday in February. Now, this is a civic holiday. A lot of places call it Family Day, but each province has its own name. Several of them use Family Day. However, here in Manitoba, where I live, it's called Louis Riel Day. And it's a day that is meant to be spent with family. And in my own hearth tradition, because it's called Louis Riel Day here, I usually bake sugar cookies shaped like bison. Sometimes I might visit the gravesite of Louis Riel, which is located in Winnipeg at St. Boniface Cathedral. And many people in Manitoba and Winnipeg visit this site year-round and leave gifts there and see Louis Riel as a father of Manitoba, a father of Confederation in some sense, but also like an ancestor of place. So beyond me, a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds see Louis Riel, who is a rather controversial figure historically, as being an ancestor of place without maybe knowing what that means. So it really, like, it does fit into heathenry, that idea of the veneration of ancestors, the veneration of spirits of place. Yeah, so really cool that that tradition just happens to be in the province that I'm living in, but yeah, everywhere else, it's Family Day pretty much. There's a few other names that are used, but it's a day for spending with family, and that's a very heathen thing. Apologies if it's a little bit choppy in sections here. I am pausing a bit to drink some liquids. Although our air quality is much better than most of the rest of the country, there is still smoke in the air, so bear with me a little bit. Yeah, so we've done February, and we are moving on to St. Patrick's Day. Now, some of these are provincially recognized only. So St. Patrick's Day officially is only recognized in Newfoundland. However, pretty much all of the Canada recognizes it unofficially. So having not lived in Newfoundland, I can't speak for how it's celebrated there. Across Canada, it's observed, although it's not an official holiday in the rest of the provinces. And it was traditionally a feast day and anniversary of the death of St. Patrick of Ireland, who was famous for driving the snakes from Ireland. So it has not been popular in pagan and heathen communities for the reason that said snakes were thought to have been pagans. Now, I've heard some arguments back and forth as to whether or not that was true, but overall, people seem to have that ideology about it. I want to talk about this one in particular because I have a very complicated relationship with this day. One of the most meaningful traditions in my family growing up had to do with St. Patrick's Day, and the tradition was that we had a special pitcher, that, like a milk pitcher, that we would use On St. Patrick's Day, we'd fill it with milk on the morning of St. Patrick's Day, and the milk would turn green. And my parents said that the leprechauns would bless the milk because we were part Irish. And it was just like a really cool tradition. Nobody else did it. It was something special. And I consider it part of my hearth practice today because leprechauns and milk, that's like house spirits or land spirits, and using milk in Europe as an offering to them, it makes sense. So despite the origins of this particular holiday, it also has that aspect for me. So it is something that I practice in my hearth practice. Whether or not other people can find meaning in it, that is up to the individuals. But yeah, just something I wanted to share there because it's kind of cool. After that, we're moving on to Good Friday and Easter. So Good Friday is a public holiday across Canada. Easter Monday, which is like in lieu of the Sunday of Easter, some provinces consider that a holiday as well, but not all. So some places have a 3-day weekend, some places have a 4-day weekend, depending where you live in Canada. Obviously, this is a Christian holiday to do with the death and resurrection of Jesus. But heathens, I find, have a very interesting relationship with this holiday. So most heathens, of course, still have family who celebrate Easter, so many might observe it this weekend with family in some way similar to Christmas. But there's also a lot else going on right at this time of year. So some people might be celebrating Ostera, which is the more broadly pagan holiday around the time of the vernal equinox. But some people might actually celebrate Ostera on Easter as well in their hearth tradition. So Ostera is often similar to Easter in there's eggs, rabbits, etc., which are all symbols of fertility. Other heathens might be celebrating Sigerbloat about the same time, depending on the year, because if you're looking at how to reckon Sigerbloat, it would be the full moon after the new moon after the equinox, and Easter is the Sunday after the full moon after the equinox, which many years can be within the same week, but not every year. So Sigerbloat is celebration of victory, either asking for victory in summer for battle or agriculture, but also celebrating victory over winter, depending on your tradition within your family or your heathen kindred. So yeah, there's a lot going on here with similar themes, but it really depends on the group. Like, if you celebrate Ostera, yeah, it might be very similar to Easter, so whereas if you celebrate Sigerbloat, there's a bit more of a separation there. They're both, there's fertility aspects, I guess, in all of them, but it could look very different for you. Just depends on your own personal tradition, and like I said, sometimes Sigerbloat is the same week or the same weekend as Easter, so there's some overlap going on there. Moving to April 23rd, again, this is a Newfoundland-only holiday called St. George's Day. This celebration commemorates the life of Christian martyr and Roman soldier St. George. It's not a widely recognized day in Canada, but it is a holiday in Newfoundland, and surprisingly, there are some pagan or heathen connections to this day. So if you look at Ruin Rasmussen's book, The Nordic Animist Year, he writes, On St. George's Day, people would walk into the woods shouting to St. George and St. Martin to take in their dogs, because now at Valborg, we let ours out. So St. George and St. Martin in this case were seen as representatives of winter and connected to the wild hunt. So basically, you're asking the wild hunt to take in their dogs so that summer can now begin. So I just found that interesting. Like, I don't know how much you in modern times would find that useful to your practice, but just interesting that there's that connection, and you could do something with it if you wanted to. People in Newfoundland, the rest of Canada probably is like, what's St. George's Day, so less of a problem, I guess. But yeah, if you live in Newfoundland and you want to do something with that, definitely check out Ruin Rasmussen's book, because it might give you some ideas. Victoria Day. So Victoria Day is the last Monday after May 25th, which seems like a strange way to reckon a day, but there's a few strange ones like that in Canada. The reason why it's that is that Victoria Day has been observed since about 1845, and originally it was on Victoria's natural birthday, May 24th. Since 1952, it's been used to recognize all new monarchs' birthdays, even though it's not their birthday, it was Victoria's birthday. In Quebec, it's instead called National Patriots' Day, and in modern times, Victoria Day weekend is officially called, or unofficially called, I mean, May 2-4 weekend. So in Canada, a 2-4 means a 24 pack of beer. So in modern times, it's observed mostly as the starting of barbecue season, but obviously there are those colonial roots which make this holiday problematic, recognizing the reigning monarch and colonialism, basically. So it might be good if we considered a name change for this holiday. It's nice to have another long weekend because we never have enough of them. But what we're recognizing from a historic point of view is quite problematic for this day. So for heathens, in addition to celebrating May 2-4 with a barbecue, depending on region, the May long weekend is also considered a time when it's safe to plant things outside in your garden without the risk of frost. And for me, this brings to mind the Pennsylvania Dutch. I'm probably going to butcher this Urgoi or Urgla tradition. So the Pennsylvanian Dutch had a tradition in which the frost giants would continue to attack until mid-May, and there's like a story that goes along with that. So there is this sort of like heathen underbelly to this time of year, and this particular timing is very close with this May long weekend to recognize when it's safe to plant your plants. So in that sense, that would be how I would go with that holiday. And yeah, if we could rename it, that would be super cool. That's a matter of contention in this house because my husband, of course, is Christian and also a bit more patriotic than I have become in recent years. So that would be an interesting one if it got renamed. I'm sure that I would hear about it. But from my perspective, it would be a good day to rename, because why are we celebrating the birthday of a queen who's long dead? and then trying to like superimpose other monarchs' birthdays over it. And should we be celebrating monarchs' birthdays at all? We're fairly separated from Britain at this point, from the United Kingdom. It's problematic. But most people in Canada, again, like, don't even think about what this day was about historically. They're more thinking, hey, it's time to have a barbecue. It's time to get together. Quite similarly, I think, to how a lot of Americans feel about Memorial Day. So, but like probably at a larger extent even than how Americans feel about Memorial Day, because I know that there's a lot of people who still celebrate Memorial Day as what it was historically representing. Yeah, moving down the list. National Indigenous People Day, which is June 21st. Now, this is an interesting one because it's nationally recognized as an important day, as a national observance, but it's not a public holiday. You don't get it off. And why don't we get it off? Because it just doesn't make sense that we don't get it off. This is something that's really important, and this is something that would benefit Canada to move away from those colonial roots if we made this into a public holiday. So National Indigenous Peoples Day is celebrated on the summer solstice, or pretty close, because it's going to be June 21st every year. We like to have things on fixed dates in the Gregorian calendar, so yeah, it's June 21st. The longest day holds deep cultural and spiritual significance for many Indigenous people, symbolizing a new season of life, a chance to start fresh, and leave past burdens behind. So, many heathens may also recognize the summer solstice in their practice for similar reasons, and it's important to recognize the land on which we are living and the people who walked on it before us. It's also important to recognize National Indigenous People Day as heathens and continue to support our Indigenous allies throughout the year. So I think this is an important one that heathens can really relate to, that is important for building growth between communities. And I wish that Canada would make it an actual holiday instead of just an observance. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of rants in this post. I wonder how long it's going to be, because it's definitely been longer than a lot of the other videos I've been making today. Alright. Here's a complicated one. This one's Quebec only. It's Saint Jean Baptiste Day, or Fête Nationale du Québec. So, historically Saint Jean Baptiste Day, but it's also become the national holiday of Quebec because Quebec is a nation within a nation. It's a celebration of being French Canadian, but historically it was the Feast of Nativity for Saint Jean Baptiste, so I'm sure it's a complicated one for heathens living in Quebec, because it's an important day for celebrating ancestors and French Canadian heritage, but then it's also related to a saint. So I don't know, I haven't talked to a ton of heathens in Quebec about this particular day, but I'm sure that that's a conflict in their mind, and I feel like other than recognizing it here, I can't really speak to this one, and I would love to hear from any heathens in Quebec out there if they wanted to share anything about how they see it. Super fascinating. So, Saint Jean Baptiste Day is June 24th. There's also another day in another province that falls on June 24th, or the Monday closest to June 24th. As I say, they like to do some interesting things with calendars in Canada and special dates. So, this is Discovery Day in Newfoundland. This is a holiday that commemorates the discovery of Newfoundland by John Cabot in 1497. To understand the idea of discovery in colonialism, we need to know about the Doctrine of Discovery and terra nullius. So, this is going to be a big long rant for me. Again, I'm not from Newfoundland, so people from Newfoundland could chime in if they want about how it's celebrated there, because I don't know much about how it's celebrated in modern times, but the idea of this celebration is equally as complicated as Victoria Day. So the Doctrine of Discovery was a series of declarations, or papal bulls as they were called, that were written by popes in the 15th century and provided religious authority for Christian empires to invade and subjugate non-Christian lands, peoples, and sovereign nations. So, a lot of bad shit right there. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube. Don't ban me. This allowed Christians to impose Christianity on these populations and claim their resources, and it was used by European nations to justify colonial expansion. The Vatican formally repudiated the 15th century Doctrine of Discovery just in April of 2023, this year. Wow. So, up until that point, the Doctrine of Discovery was considered still alright by the Vatican. Yikes. Terra nullius, similarly, is related to this. So, terra nullius is a term that refers to nobody's land. And it's a term used in public international law to describe a space that can be inhabited but that does not belong to a state, meaning the land is not owned by anyone. Terra nullius is problematic because historically the church painted Indigenous people as being less than human in order to take their land and subjugate them. So basically, no one lives here. So then, the Doctrine of Discovery. So language repudiating the Doctrine of Discovery and terra nullius was included in UNDRIP's legislation that was passed in June 2021. So yeah, this is still very fresh, and problematic within Canada. These were things that were called out by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as things that need to have reparations. We're starting to see the reparations, but as I said, the Doctrine of Discovery until April of this year was considered okay. So Discovery Day. Yeah. How do we mark this day as heathens? I would suggest educating ourselves about colonial history would be the best we could hope for here, because, ouch. Like, again, either we need to rename this day, or just, yeah. I don't know if we can recover from this one. Like, it's even more problematic in some ways than Victoria Day, so, yeah. Anyone from Newfoundland who sees this and wants to chime in, like, you can reach out to me on Instagram is usually where I'm most responsive, but also my Facebook. I have an email as well. My email is just hearthsidecommunity@gmail.com. No spaces, no periods or anything, just hearthsidecommunity@gmail.com. Yeah, so if you have anything to add, would love to hear from you on this one. It's, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Okay, moving on to more fun colonialism in Canada. Canada Day! July 1st. Canada Day commemorates the Confederation of Canada, which occurred on July 1st, 1867. It is usually celebrated with celebrations in parks across Canada, barbecues, fireworks, wearing of red and white or Canadian flags. More recently, there has been a movement to start wearing orange to recognize the Indigenous children who died in residential schools in Canada. Why did this occur? So why is orange suddenly being associated with Canada Day? Well, over the course of the COVID years, it was discovered that there were mass graves at a lot of the residential school sites. And it was discovered in the spring, like in May, June-ish, that this was the case. The first of the graves were discovered. And so, coming up to Canada Day of, I believe it was 2021, but don't quote me on that, people were feeling like it was not in our best interest to celebrate Canada Day when these graves were continuously being discovered. To the point that some people commented online, like, if we were to have a period of mourning, in which one day was commemorated one child, with like a flag at half-mast, they estimated that our flag would be at half-mast for 11 years. So that was very raw coming into Canada Day. And a lot of people chose to wear orange that day instead of red or white, which are the colors of our flag. And then last year, there were more people who wore red and white, but there was still a lot of people who wore orange. And I think and I hope that that will be something that continues into the future, because we do need to recognize that the Confederation of Canada was not good for Indigenous people. And so, as heathens within Canada, we need to recognize Canada Day in some way, perhaps, and most of us do, but it's important to understand our shared history in this country and carefully weigh the positive and negative aspects of this day. So just being culturally sensitive, I guess. I personally have been wearing orange because not only to recognize the Indigenous children, although that's a large part of it because I feel very connected to the Indigenous community as well, but also because as an inclusive modern heathen here, I think that countering nationalist narratives within our faith is important, because it's showing the inclusive side of heathenry. It's giving us an opportunity to show what inclusive heathenry looks like, and the same as this, right? Being mindful of intersectionality within heathenry, being mindful of intersectionality within Canada. So sometimes we have to look at the bigger picture to figure out what the best way to observe a day is. So yeah, yay, lots of little rants for you today. I'm sure I'm going to get some comments on YouTube, because YouTube is the Wild West. Not quite as much as TikTok, but the Wild West. Okay, July 9th. This is None of It Only None of It Day. And Nunavut is our newest territory in Canada. So in Canada we have 10 provinces, 3 territories. Nunavut Day is the day the Parliament of Canada passed the Nunavut Act in 1999. It officially declared Nunavut as a distinct region that is legally separate from the Northwest Territories. Nunavut means our land in the Inuit language of Inuktitut. So this would be an important day for heathens in Nunavut because it celebrates the land and peoples of that territory. So again, to do with ancestors, spirits of place, ancestors of place. It's a very important move for inclusive heathenry, for an inclusive Canada, to recognize the Indigenous people of that region and give them their own place, basically. So yeah, that one's a cool one, but Nunavut only because it's the birthday of Nunavut, basically. Moving on, we have another civic holiday, so it has a different name pretty much in every province, and it's the first Monday in August. This day has many different names in different provinces and territories. Some places call it Family Day again, but we had Family Day in February. But it's also, I think, called Nova Scotia Day or something, and a couple other things in different provinces. It's generally celebrated as a weekend for camping, trips to the lake, barbecues by Canadian families. In Manitoba, it's called Terry Fox Day, so it commemorates Terry Fox's run across Canada to bring awareness about cancer and cancer research. From a heathenry perspective, not too problematic, actually. Celebrate this day with your families, and doesn't really require too much extra thought to contextualize. Moving on, Labor Day. This is also a day in the United States. We spell ours with a U because labor, L-A-B-O-U-R. But in the States, no U, because we use closer to the British spellings in that regard within Canadian English. First Monday in September. So Labor Day celebrates the rights of workers with a day off. It's also usually the last long weekend before school starts in many parts of Canada. It's commemorated with last camping trips and trips to the lake. Again, I don't think it needs to be contextualized, rights for workers, not problematic. Going camping with your family, not problematic. So, yeah, actually a good one. Nothing really to go into there. Here's a new one. National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th. This day is also called Orange Shirt Day, and it's recognized by wearing orange. You will remember that orange was also worn at Canada Day. And here is the real reason why orange was chosen as a color. So the reason for orange shirts is because of the story of Phyllis Webstad, who wore an orange shirt on her first day of residential school and was forced to take it off. And then it was taken from her and not given back. So she'd picked out this orange shirt, especially for her first day of school. She was excited. It was stripped from her. She was forced to wear a uniform, taken from her and never given back. So just a traumatizing experience on her first day of school. But this story symbolizes the experiences of Indigenous children in residential school. And this day is also associated with the phrase, every child matters. So this is an important day for Canadians, also including heathens, and a good opportunity to learn more about residential school system. The last residential school only closed in 1996, so this is all very fresh for Canadians. Learning about the treatment of Indigenous people up to the present time, and moving towards reconciliation. So yeah, a commemorative day is what it is, for our shared history. Yeah. Moving into Thanksgiving Day, the second Monday in October. So Canadian Thanksgiving is a little bit more chill than American Thanksgiving. It's also at a different time. It's in October. So it's commemorated with small gatherings of friends and family. The first Canadian Thanksgiving may have been in 1578 when Sir Martin Frobisher sailed from England to Newfoundland, and he celebrated safe passage over the ocean with his crew with a meal of salt beef, mushy peas, and biscuits. Yummy. Luckily not what we usually eat in modern times. Canadian Thanksgiving was, as a tradition, started in about 1859 when Protestant leaders called on the colonial government to create a day for giving thanks. So this was before the Confederation of Canada, so that's why I'm using the word colonial government, although, yeah, it still has to do with colonialism. But yeah, this was before Canada was even a country. Thanksgiving Day in Canada is linked to the European tradition of harvest festivals with symbols of fruits and vegetables, corn, wheat, and also the cornucopia depicting the bounty of the season. Turkeys are common seasons of Thanksgiving, or common symbols of Thanksgiving, but some families may eat other foods instead of turkey, such as the French-Canadian meat pie tourtière, or foods from that family's cultural heritage, which can be any cultural heritage. I've attended Thanksgiving that had food from China, food from Mexico. Just depends on who's celebrating. And it's about coming together. So quite often it will be like a turkey, and then the side dishes may be less traditional. I've had chili, I've had all sorts of wonderful things from different cultural groups. We've had Thanksgiving with people who had just recently moved from India and recognizing that they were vegetarian, a lot of them, so having stuffed squash instead of turkey and having all these different things and just sharing that experience with family and friends. Thanksgiving in Quebec is called Action de Grâce, but it might not be celebrated by certain families. For Indigenous people in Canada, it's become increasingly difficult to ignore the holiday's colonial undertones. The stories of the first pilgrims in the United States who were greeted by Indigenous people with food and help to survive, but subsequently the people from Europe took advantage of Indigenous people, committed atrocities against them. So it is steeped up in that. Even the Canadian Thanksgiving, there is that undertone to all of it. So for many heathens, Thanksgiving celebrates family and the harvest, and may be close to heathen celebrations such as winter nights or other holidays, just depending on your traditions. Winter nights marks the end of the summer season for heathens, and there's many reasons to continue to celebrate harvest at this time, but also be mindful of our Indigenous allies and how this celebration may be perceived. In my own experience, my Cree adoptive mum, she always wishes me a happy Turkey Day, but can't quite bring herself to say Happy Thanksgiving, and I never bring it up. I let her take the lead on that, and whatever is comfortable for her. I would not wish Happy Thanksgiving to an Indigenous person unless they have made it clear that that is okay with them. So, as you can see, there's a lot to unpack here. That's all of the holidays within national holidays and provincial holidays within Canada that are big enough to get on the list that I found on the internet anyways. I'm sure there's a lot of like individual things that provinces have that did not make it on those lists, but yeah, like those are all the national ones for sure, and a bunch of provincial ones that some of them I didn't even know about. There's a lot to unpack here, because most of these holidays are Christian or colonial in nature, so creating new and meaningful traditions for ourselves and our families, and also respecting and honoring Indigenous communities in Canada. It's going to be a long process of healing for all of us, and it's going to take some time and mindfulness and many people coming together to come up with new ways to honor Canadian culture in a respectful way that benefits all of us. So, like, we don't want to have less holidays in Canada, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to figure out if we can maybe rename some of these holidays, and attach new meanings, create new traditions, and just, like, on the family level even, like, how we can look at these days differently to benefit everyone. Yeah, I posted some further reading on a lot of Indigenous issues related to this, in particular because it seemed like a lot of this, like, it has to do with allyship to Indigenous people, recognizing our colonial history. So if that's something that you're interested in, there's a bunch of links. I'll post them below. And yeah, this has been a long one. I don't know. I might get through one more today, but I'm going to have to leave fairly shortly to get to this Pride Parade. So, yeah. Thank you for checking this out. This is definitely one of my longer videos so far. And I will see you next time.